Good evening everyone. Benvenuti. Welcome to this live stream. And no, there were no cracks on the Fujian deck. The cracks that you have seen in the thumbnail, well, I sort of drew them on a picture, and but they have been actually inspired by a controversy that happened some time ago when satellite photos showed what apparently seemed to be large cracks in the hull, in the flight deck, and in reality they were liquids that have been leaked on the flight deck while during the construction of the aircraft carrier. And what I find very meaningful is that news were actually very ready, news outlets were readily readily distributed this news that the Fujian carrier was falling into pieces. There's nothing like that. We'll see later in the live stream what is happening to that carrier. But today's live stream is even more important than understanding if the Fujian is actually still in one piece or not. This is something that I care a lot. It is something which I consider particularly important, so please stay till the end, because the scenario that we are going to slowly build and present is something really disquieting, and probably our future depends from that. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, and probably I hope that I'm wrong. But we will need to, we will see something which is something that has bugged me, that didn't let me sleep well at night for some time. So please tell me if the audio and the video are okay. And I suppose then we are ready to go. So, is the video okay? Okay. Can you hear me well? Okay, ready? Everything is good. Let's go. So in this video, we will start from discussing why China is building its carriers. It's something that we are actually used to, and we're sort of giving for granted, but it's, if you start digging deep, there are probably some scenarios that are quite a little bit disquieting, as I said, and but okay, let's stay with me. Please stay with me. So, and before starting, just a small thing: this video is sponsored by you, This could have been a long video with maybe could attract a sponsor, but in this case, it's all up to you. Thank you very much for all those who are supporting the channel. Please, if you can afford, please consider supporting the channel in the ways that are shown here. So, let's start from the Chinese geography. I mean, this is still an aircraft channel, but bear with me, okay? So let's start from this map. This is basically a map that shows the world maritime traffic. And as you can see here from China, there is a lot of traffic going through, and the maritime traffic is extremely important for China. The communication, China's commerce through the land frontier is just a fraction of what goes through the large ports of the Chinese coasts. And this is a screenshot from maritimetraffic.com that is basically showing the amount of traffic that goes through the northern and southern Chinese Sea. You can see basically three streams. There is a very wide and dispersed stream that goes through the Pacific and ends up in the American continent, either with the United States, but also in the whole American continent. China is becoming an important commercial partner, even for countries in South America. Oh, the presentation is zoomed in. Okay, sorry. Let me see. Apologies, my mistake. This one is the correct one. So, as you can see, as you can see, there are three streams of traffic. One that goes through the American continent. The second one, which is very important, and goes through the Malacca Strait here, and goes through the South China Sea and skims Vietnam and Cambodia. And then there's another interesting stream that goes toward Indonesia and goes even down toward Australia. These are three very important streams of communications and commerce for China. So in case of conflict, obviously this traffic is going to be in danger and it is likely going to stop. And in case of a long conflict, this will be a problem. This will be an economical problem for China. Now, Chinese economy is based on, used to be based on export, and now is pivoting toward the internal market. But that's not the main problem. You can survive without exporting. It has economic effects, but you can survive. What you can't survive, what is more problematic, is the imports. Because there are some imports that you can replace and some other imports that you can't replace. And it is actually a spectrum. There's a different level of complexity, difficulty in replacing the imports. Some are impossible, some are relatively easy. But anyway, you see here in blue the countries that are actually that China is importing with, that are actually on the other side of the Malacca Strait. And in case of conflict, the first three, United States, South Korea, and Japan, and probably also Australia, are going to probably not be accessible anymore for imports. So what are these imports? So as you can see, China imports electrical and electronic equipment as the main category of import, and that is something that with investments, with some effort, can be replaced. But after that, we have mineral fuel oils, distillation products, ores, slag, oilseed, grain, seed, fruits, but also down here at the bottom, pulp of wood, fibrous cellulosic material, but also plaster, lime, cement, construction materials, and so on. So it's not a surprise that oil is one of the main imports for China, and it's the kind of import that you can't replace. The same are minerals, the ores. If you just don't have them, or you don't have enough, you will be lacking them. So let's have some examples. So we are obviously talking about commodities. So the imports that are difficult to replace are commodities. Everything else with an adequate level of investment and with adequate measures can be replaced, but this cannot be replaced. And the Chinese top commodity imports are obviously petroleum, iron ore, petroleum gas, soybeans, refined copper, and coal. For example, if you go and look to crude oil, the main importer now is Russia, as many of you will know. But also there is Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Iraq, and so on. And these, the one in blue, are all the suppliers that are on the other side of the Malacca Strait, and the one in yellow are United States and Australia, where in case of a conflict, in case of hostilities, are going to become inaccessible anymore. And you also may think that Brazil won't be that easily accessed. So it's definitely not an easy situation for China. And the situation for the iron ore, which is very important to keep the most of the mechanical industries, construction industry going, are not much different. The main supplier is Australia. There is Brazil, which is sort of in a gray situation, but there is also South Africa, India, and these are actually very, very small. So again, there is a good possibility that this kind of import is going to cease in case of hostilities. Anyway, if we want to have a look at the food, because you can't just build with, or better, you can't build without eating. Okay, the main the main supplier is from Brazil. The main supplier is Brazil, which is again in a gray area. Then you have the USA, Argentina, and the other is debatable. Canada will cease, but these are really small. The top two are going to be again influenced by the hostilities. So, in case of a conflict, and particularly in case of protracted conflict, there is a large fraction of the Chinese commodity imports that won't be available anymore. We may expect that everything is exchanged with Russia will keep being exchanged, but we may expect also to have other connection with Central Asia and so on, but these are minor. China depends heavily from the sea for the imports of what is not available inside the country. So this is a key consideration for the Chinese ruling class, obviously. So the one drawn in red is basically the jugular vein of the Chinese economy. It's this connection that goes for this path, this route that goes from the ports in the South China, through the South China Sea, through the Malacca Strait, skims India, and goes to the Persian Gulf. So this is probably the key elements in Chinese strategic thinking. This line and the mercantile traffic along this line is essential. So, in case of a conflict with the United States and the Western Alliance, then what are the reasonable Chinese priorities? Well, they are probably like this, in the sense the North China Sea, it is important because it's an area where there is a concentration of forces, but it's definitely less important than the South China Sea. And that's the area where China has been expansive as through the proclamation of the 9-dash line that actually includes many of the islands and the atolls in that sea, which are actually contested, whose sovereignty is contested. China claims them as Chinese territory on the basis of a very old map that has never been really discussed. But all the other countries around them have claims on the same territories, and this has been a source of friction. And in the South China Sea, there are also some Chinese military bases built on these small islands. And this is perfectly coherent with Chinese strategic requirement of keeping that the jugular artery open. The second element is the Malacca Strait here, which is obviously controlled by Singapore, but also this area is shared between Malaysia and Indonesia, and when you're just out of the strait into the Indian Ocean, right here you have where Malacca, just below where Malacca Strait tag is, there are the Andaman Islands, which are Indian. And all the mercantile traffic, the oil traffic, goes through this area south of India. And this is an area which is actually under Indian control, or could be easily controlled by the Indians. And it's not a random fact that the Maldives Islands, which are pretty much where the arrow of the Indian approaches ends, have recently been, convinced by the Chinese politics to move to Chinese side. There used to be some patrol aircraft, Indian maritime patrol aircraft, based on these islands, and now they have been asked to leave, and they're going to be replaced by Chinese, probably by Chinese maritime patrol aircraft. This is obviously significant because it's sort of an intrusion in an area that is considered historically part of the Indian sphere of influence, but it is obviously, this does not change the fact that the Indian Navy and the Indian Air Force can make this area of the Indian Ocean completely unavailable. And the U.S. Navy, by the way, can also reach out in the Indian Ocean. There is a base. We'll see later. We see there are some bases in this area too. Okay, so if this is the strategic imperative, maintain this line of connection, maintain this line of this logistic line. I like this term with the Middle East. Then what is all the fuss about Taiwan? Well, Taiwan, as such, is a relic of the Chinese Civil War that ended in 1949. The Kuomintang and the nationalist forces, actually, after being defeated by the communist forces, they retreated on Taiwan, and yep, they remain there. They have never been. The Chinese have never tried to actually dislodge them from their position. Michael A. Mayo, 20, thank you very much. Using the same analysis, wouldn't you conclude that Imperial Germany could never have gone to war in 1914 and Japan could not have gone to war in 1949? Yes, it was they made a strategic error. They made a strategic error at the time. And we've seen the consequences. They've lost the war. So, do the mainland China, the People's Republic of China, get along with the Republic of China? How are their relations? Well, actually, people can freely travel, can move capitals from between the two states. They can relocate. Well, they speak the same language. And currently, there is a massive commercial exchange between Taiwan and mainland China. So apparently, as things are now, they get along very well. But then sometimes you see things like those shown in this map, where the Chinese do live fire exercises all around the Isle of Taiwan, and this is what happened when Nancy Pelosi some time ago actually visited Taiwan, and this was the kind of demonstration that the PRC actually put together for give her a warm welcome. So what is the problem, the root of the problem? So they both claim to be the legitimate government of China, of the whole of China. And quite curiously, why the People's Republic, why the mainland China has occupied the South China Sea, the islands of the South China Sea, and have these territorial disputes we're mentioning before, Taiwan actually says the same. It supports the same thesis that says they internationally are saying that those islands are part of the Republic of Taiwan, and they have exactly the same friction on those islands with the other states in the area, which is sort of fun. Anyway, from the point of view of the Chinese Communist Party, Taiwan is still an open wound. It's the civil war that was never completed. And Xi Jinping made clear many times that the reunification of Taiwan is a long-term objective of China, and the reunification. And that is, let's say, has become one of the, 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 let's say, has become one one of those situations among states that are more a point of principle than a pragmatic requirement. Okay. Actually, in practice, I think that both of them know that the best solution would be to leave the things as they are and just forget. However, the PRC can't do that, and even some political parties inside Taiwan can't fathom in any way, shape, or form our unification with mainland China if the mainland China remain communist. And China has built a rhetoric around this Taiwan situation, and it is apparently ambiguous. Their behavior is ambiguous. Sometimes they say that the reunification will be peaceful and there's all the time in the world to do the reunification. Some other times it says we are preparing for war. So it is part of the political game, obviously, to actually cater to the necessities of the moment. But there is basically no doubt that the long-term strategy of China is the reunification with Taiwan, even though in practice is not that important. So we also, why China is so focused on Taiwan is because, well, China, their national perception is that they are now exiting on what they call the century of humiliation. China has been a very important power and for most of the history of humanity. And the last century, where colonial powers sort of exerted some level of domination, some level of control on China that brought to terrible political instability, civil wars, fractures of the unified states, the Japanese invasion, the fight in the Second World War, the Civil War, and so on. So they think that period was a dark period in their national history, and 3 or 4 decades ago, they started what they call the Great Rejuvenation of the nation, which basically means, well, industrialize, improve economically, improve the quality of life of the people living in China, and start being, again, an important power on the world stage. And what they're doing, which may be deemed up to a point aggressive, is exactly what any emerging power does. And mind, I am not giving any ethical judgment in here. So if Americans believe that they are ethically and morally on the right side, Chinese think that they are ethically and morally on the right side, and the same can be said in many, many other disputes that happen around the world. So there's no point going through an ethical analysis of what has happened, who is right, who is wrong. Please consider that the very definition of power, of great power, of emerging power, or even regional power, is a country that is messing with other countries. A country is not a power if it can't mess with any other country, okay? But any country that exerts some form of influence on other countries, somewhat limiting the choices that these other countries have, is a power, and then there is obviously a ladder of degrees, that goes from regional power to continental power to global power, and so on. And China is just an emerging power on the global level. And so, obviously, the appearance of a new power is a problem for the extant powers. And since we are emerging from 20 years, more or less, 2 or 3 decades, where the United States more or less were the only dominant power at global level, well, this is a problem. The best solution would be that United States and China meet midway, potentially on Midway Atoll. That would be a great place. Shake their hand and say, welcome, thank you, let's try to find a way to get along. Unfortunately, this is probably not going to happen because there are several points of disputes, and that's the situation. This is the world like it is. Unfortunately, as I said, it's rather pointless to give an ethical judgment. Each one of us will have its own ethical judgment, obviously. But if we want to analyze what is going to happen, want to analyze scenario, understand what is happening, we need to leave this aside, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, Taiwan has more a symbolic value than an actual value, because it is perceived to be the last remnant of this century of humiliation. And obviously, this symbolic value is important for the Chinese. Now, Taiwan has been doing fine for a very long time. What would happen if it should become a fully fledged state? Because today is not. Most of the world actually accept that there is only one China, and even they have the other countries have good relationship with Taiwan. They do not really recognize it as a fully fledged state. It also has a particular status within the United Nations. That's a very particular, strange situation. And but obviously, if Taiwan pointed to proclaim itself as an independent state, that would probably be unacceptable for mainland China. And mind that there are some political parties within Taiwan that aim exactly to that. But if this would happen, this would definitely bring to a heightened tension in the area. And since the area is so important, the waves will cover the entire world. Another interesting thing is that is the objective 2049, in the sense that the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, has given to the PLA, the armed force of China, that actually depend, have a chain of command that goes through the party. They have given a general strategic objective to become, by 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the foundation of the Chinese Communist Party, I was saying to become, by 2049, a world-level military organization. They didn't define exactly what this means, but if you look at some of the Chinese literature that has been produced in the last 2 or 3 decades, this basically means substantial strategic parity with the United States. This is how they see the thing. So, what is the scenario given that what we know now? What is the possible scenario that is going to unfold in case of a conflict? So, well, United States is undoubtedly preparing for a shooting war. In the last 2 or 3 years, there have been a lot of war games, some classified, a few more or less public, that have sort of played out different scenarios of this conflict with China. And this is sort of perplex from my point of view, because we keep saying that a shooting war with Russia is just the first step on the ladder that takes to the nuclear conflagration. But China has nukes too, fewer strategic nukes than China, for sure, but definitely enough to make a lot of damages. I would say unacceptable damages to any opponent country if the integrity of China would have been menaced. So I think that even thinking of a shooting war with China, with United States and other nuclear power being involved, is unthinkable. But yeah, let's park this thought for the moment and let's move on, because apparently planners on both sides believe that a conventional war may happen and may remain conventional for for some time, and even for a protracted period. So let's have a look. And so there are in the United States. In the United States, there have been plenty of war games among all these different organizations, but they are all based on this scenario where the Chinese try to invade Taiwan, and that's the base. That's the core assumption. In some scenario, actually include the fact that Chinese may want to strike other bases in the area, other stakeholders in the area, other military concentrations in the area they believe are dangerous. In other cases, they don't do that. But that's the key, the core tenet is the Chinese invasion of Taiwan, amphibious invasion of Taiwan, with the purpose of reconquering the island. And by the way, this one that you see here is a very interesting game that could be worth a video on itself, because it was a simulation of a scenario where the collaborative combat aircraft has entered service. So it's quite interesting in itself. So these were games, the plans of the Western side, because we don't really know the Chinese plan. We just can't get. The only thing we can do is guessing. But on the Western side, the idea is how to stop a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, and it is. And so the question, I suppose, is, can the Chinese pull it off? Well, it is difficult, but potentially possible. I mean, there are several elements, obviously, that need to be considered in this equation. But let's start to make a comparison of the two forces. Sorry, before the comparison, please note on this map which are the current and foreign and potential new bases above the US in the area. All of this, the fact that there is all those blue, light blue dots, is because the US is trying to acquire new positions in the area, exactly to try to contain the Chinese forces in what is normally called the first island chain. That is the line that goes from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines, Indonesia, and Singapore. Okay. So as you can see, there are plenty of those. And as I said before, some of the scenarios that are playing in the war games focus on include preemptive strikes on some of these bases. So let's make a confrontation. So, well, in terms of defense spending, which is normally something that needs to be taken with an enormous pinch of salt, there's no comparison. Okay, it's China is spending 20 times more, almost 20 times more. So, okay. In terms of conventional ballistic missile launches, China has 280, rapidly expanding. These are 2023 beginning mid-2023 data, but they are expanding very quickly. So China has about 280 ballistic missile launchers of a range that is relevant. I mean, so I'm not counting artillery systems and so on. And they are rapidly growing. Taiwan has none. This number is quite interesting because we don't know how many missiles, how many rounds these launchers have, but this is more or less the size of the salvo. Obviously, it never works like that. Okay, things always go wrong. Normally, you have to consider that between a quarter or a third of every arsenal is not available for a reason or another. In terms of ISR, in terms of satellites, China has 11 communication satellites and 141 ISR satellites that do the most various things, but that's a serious number, okay? The Chinese have a serious capability to keep the rest of the globe under control. The Taiwanese happen to have launched one satellite for intelligence. The amphibious brigades, which would be important for an attack on Taiwan, are 6, but they are actually expanding as well. And Taiwan has 2. These are considered, in China, these are considered to be elite units. There are 2 air assault brigades. Taiwan has none. Overall, in terms of maneuver brigades, there are about 77 brigades in China. Taiwan has about a third of them are heavy units, the others are sort of lighter units. Taiwan has 7 maneuver brigade, medium heavy, and 27 light reserve units. In terms of submarines, which is an area where China is still not yet is not expanding as you would expect. China has 6 nuclear attack submarine and 46 diesel or electric submarines. The Republic of Korea has just 4. China has 2 carriers. They're obviously expanding. We'll get back to that. And the Republic of Korea has nothing. In terms of surface combat unit, China has 7 cruisers, 42 DDGs, and 41 frigates. These are very quickly expanding. About a bit more than a half of these numbers are actually very modern units that are perfectly equivalent to any Western units. Taiwan has 4 DDGs and 21 frigates that tend to be quite old. In terms of amphibious capabilities, China has 11 between LPDs and LHDs, and this is actually expanding. They're doing some very interesting design. They're coming up with some very interesting design for amphibious war. The Taiwan has 2 that are basically going to be used to connect with the islands in the Taiwan Strait that are actually part of the ROC. There are also other smaller amphibious ships, and China has 49. But you also have to consider that there are dozens and dozens and dozens, probably even more than 100 ferries, civilian ferries that can be used for an assault on Taiwan eventually. ROC has 6. The number of logistic ships is 153 for China and just 9 for the ROC. Then don't be misled by this number. The number of large units, oceanic units, is relatively small. It's no more than a dozen. But yes, they still have a large logistic capability, either for refuel, resupply, transport, repair, and so on. The naval aviation, the Chinese naval aviation has 45 bombers, 179 fighters, and I actually, the plus means that there are actually more, but I left outside anything that is not new. New means either a flanker derivative or a J10 or J20. Okay, China still has having service some few hundreds of those, and we don't consider them here. 37 anti-submarine aircraft. Sorry, 20 potentially anti-submarine warfare aircraft, and a lot of helicopters. There are about 37 early warning, electronic warfare, electronic reconnaissance, and blah blah aircraft, and just 5 tankers, which seems a very small number. Then the Air Force has 170. The Republic of Taiwan has just 12 maritime patrol aircraft. The People's Republic of China has 176 bomber. The Republic of China has none. In terms of fighters, exactly always considering the new ones, China had, at the time of when the military balance 2023 was closed, 1,182 fighters, modern, as I said before. There are probably at least 600 or 700 of the previous generation whose effectiveness is dubious, maybe reconnaissance, but that's it. The Republic of Korea has about 390. I'm leaving out, for example, very old aircraft like the F-5s. Okay. Electronic warfare. 31 China, 1 Taiwan. ISR 52 China, 7 Taiwan. These include some dedicated reconnaissance fighter or aircraft. Airborne early warning 33 China, 6 Taiwan, that has relatively modern Okais. 271 transport aircraft for China, just 33 for Taiwan. 21 tanker, which is something where China is actually lacking, and none for the Republic of China. Taiwan, some launchers, I left out the pluses because I left out the medium to short range units. There are about 780 launches between Army and Air Force batteries in service in China, and 152 in the Republic of China. So as you see, there's no match. Okay, China is a gorilla a 2,000-pound gorilla, and Taiwan is small. Just don't, in case of invasion, however, don't give a defeat give a defeat for certain, because while the part of the island facing the mainland is relatively flat, and some flatlands on the coast and a number of beaches that are suitable for the invasion, the mountain of the interiors are very rugged, and the west coast is rugged as well, so it's not suitable for landing. So you can envisage a situation in which the Chinese may end up establishing bridgeheads, expanding bridgeheads. They end up destroying the Taiwanese Air Force, if no one else is actually involved in the conflict. They destroy the Taiwanese Air Force, they destroy the Taiwanese Navy, or they put in a situation where they can't do really anything. And then they conquer the coastal plains with a force that they end up capable of maintaining, but then moving into the mountains will become probably complex, and if the Taiwanese don't give up, non-conventional warfare, guerrilla tactics can actually exact a very high price from the Chinese, at least potentially. So an invasion of Taiwan, so if China decided to invade Taiwan, it's something that they can do. It's not an easy feat. It's they potentially may end up being bogged down in a very long-term confrontation that is not going to do good to both sides. So if you look at the areas that are expanding the most, well, it probably makes sense if you're looking at in the light of an invasion of Taiwan. The landing units, the marine units, is actually, as I said, it was expanding. They are going to be more or less 3 times the size in the next few years. So yes, that's definitely something you may want to do if you do amphibious operations. They are also, as I was mentioning before, producing some very interesting designs for amphibious ships like the Type 75, and I find very interesting this one. The planned is not yet delivered, but it's planned and probably be built. The Type 76, which are other than helicopters, it is going to have a electromagnetic catapult for drones and unmanned UCAVs, which is actually very interesting. This becomes a very interesting type of light carrier that has but many uses beyond amphibious assault. In the meanwhile, there are 388 of you, which I think is fantastic. Thank you very much for coming and see an old man that yells at the clouds. So the role of so always in the same perspective of invading Taiwan, they are actually expanding the surface combatant number, which at this point will be necessary to protect the amphibious component. The ballistic anti-ship missiles and the large number of available cruise missiles, either launched by the aircraft or launched by the ground, are going to keep the United States fleet at arm's length. They will impede, or at least this is the plan, they are going to impede them to get too close to be able to help Taiwan. at which the United States is replying with the pools concept, but this is something that we are going to see a different time. The long-range software missiles are going to create these bubbles of exclusions around the coast and on top of the invasion area, particularly if you can transfer some of these launches in Taiwan, then it becomes very difficult for an opponent air force to operate. And and the Chinese Air Force will augment and contribute to all those missions that we have just laid out that may be necessary to invade Taiwan, because it has the capabilities of fight air-to-air, is an air-to-air contest with the Western force. Obviously, the jury is still out, and I hope it's not going to become a settled dispute, but definitely the Chinese have progressed to a point that the Chinese Air Force has progressed to a point where it is definitely a non-negligible force. So, if this is the case, so what the Chinese are doing is focused on preparation of invading Taiwan. Maybe they won't do it, maybe it will become a peaceful reunification and blah, blah, and blah, blah, but the military preparation is focused on that. How do you explain these? How do you explain these fours? Liaoning, Shandong, Fujian, and the projected Type 004. How do you explain that they are investing in aircraft carriers? Sorry. So let's come to the carriers. So there are two Stobar carrier, Type 001 and 002, derived from the Soviet Kuznetsov design. There is one Type 003, but more likely will be two. These are Katobar carriers, not much smaller than an American supercarrier. And there is the projected Type 004, which is a nuclear carrier, more or less the same size as an American Ford carrier. And probably there are many more to come, actually. So, and the point, and if the Chinese do everything to invade Taiwan, why they're doing such a big investment? That's puzzling, no? Well, and actually it's quite puzzling the fact that the Chinese also have two shipyards capable of producing aircraft. One is in Dalian in the north, in the Yellow Sea, and the other one is in Shanghai. And by the way, we have so many pictures of the Fujian carrier because the shipyard is not far from the landing pad of the Shanghai International Airport. So a lot of people from the aircraft take pictures of the carrier. So the Type 001, the Stobar Liaoning hull number 16, was built in Dalian in the north. And again in the north, the Shandong, the Type 002, the Shandong was built again. The Fujian, on the contrary, has been built in Shanghai, and it is nearing completion. And the Type 004 is unnamed as yet, but is planned to happen in Dalian. We know that, and we know that the project is starting because in the Dalian area they are hiring people who actually have experience in aircraft projects. In China now I have 3 projects, and the name of the project and we know that's a nuclear carrier because the name of the project has the same designation as all the other naval projects that involve nuclear energy. So there is definitely a nuclear aircraft carrier that is going to be built in Dalian. Also, we know that tenders for the long lead components, which are the catapults, the arresting gear, the propulsion, have already been issued some time ago. So it's definitely happening. In the pictures or in the models that are actually available by this Type 004, the hull number is 20. And so since the Fujian is 18, has hull number 18, the gap with the 19 seems to suggest, some analysts believe so, that there's going to be another Type 003 built in Shanghai. So it seems that the Dalian shipyard is going to progress the technology. The Shanghai shipyard is going to build the bulk. Okay. So just a few more details about the carrier. So the CV-16 Liaoning was commissioned in 2012. It seems yesterday, actually. It is very interesting because there was the Soviet Varyag hull that was half-built, that was abandoned in a shipyard in Nikolaev, in Ukraine, and the Chinese entrepreneur actually purchased the ship. They towed the ship and all around the world till Dalian, and the ship was completely rebuilt with the help of some Ukrainian designers. Was completely renewed, completely rebuilt, and the result was the Liaoning. The carrier wing is relatively small. I mean, it's a Catobar carrier with only 54,000 tons displacement, and it's not that big. So there are just 24 Shenyang J-15 plus 14 helicopters. The Shandong is a variant and a larger, quite substantially larger improvement on the same design, and it is a 65,000 tons unit, so about 10,000 tons higher. It was not commissioned in 2012, it was commissioned in 2016, if this is a mistake. And the carrier wing is 32 J-15 plus the same number of helicopters. The J-15, for those who don't know, is or has been originally reverse engineered from the Soviet Su-33. Apparently, the Ukrainians still have a prototype of the aircraft available that they sold it to China, and it was basically reverse engineered. Was introduced in 2013. The units built are 60, but there's going to be a B variant that is going to be built for the Fujian, the Type 003, that is catapult compatible with the catapults, and it is going to have a completely overhauled avionics and combat systems. Okay, it's a flanker, So everything you can think of about a flanker applies to this aircraft. But it's a pretty old flanker. I wouldn't say it's obsolete, but it's definitely not new. Since it doesn't have a very high thrust-to-weight ratio from a Stobar carrier, it can carry a lot of payload. It has been seen mostly with air-to-air weapons, which tend to be somewhat lighter than anti-ship or air-to-ground weapons. And this is basically consistent with the original Kuznetsov design. Those carriers were not designed to be used in a carrier group as it was for the American Air Force. They were their design, their mission was to be capable of carrying a number of fighters dedicated to air defense and eventually reconnaissance with the main battle groups, but with the main Soviet battle groups. But the Soviet battle groups were centered around the Kirov or Oslava class cruisers. I mean, the large cruisers with the large surface-to-surface missiles. So the purpose of those carriers was just to provide the air cover. Okay. And so that's basically the reason why they were okay in that context. In a context where you expect that the carrier is actually doing more general operation, it is definitely less effective. It still has some capabilities. Actually, having something that flies is better than having nothing. Definitely not ideal. Couple of things that not everybody knows, some curiosities. Both Liaoning and Shandong have been classified for years as training ships, or according to some sources, experimental ships, just to see if aircraft carriers were a good thing. Okay. The Liaoning has been declared operational just 3 or 4 years ago, being commissioned in 2012. Probably took 8 years to become operational. So the purpose of these two ships, while retaining some military capabilities, was mostly to create the Chinese naval aviation, which was obviously in need of starting from scratch. Apparently, the first consultants that helped the Chinese were the Brazilians, that not many of you may know, but they had a carrier till not many years ago. A conventional Catobar carrier till not many years ago. So now, obviously, more than a decade has passed. So they have built, they have built a core of, well, pilots, officers, but also crews that are actually expert and know what is the reality of operating a carrier in the ocean. I mean, one of the problems that are actually mentioned about the Chinese Navy quite often is that they don't have the pedigree, the heritage of the U.S. Navy or the Royal Navy or other Western navies. Yes, it's true. But with every mission, every time they go out at sea, every time they take off and land, every time they execute their training, that becomes less and less and less and less true. So the Chinese are incredibly good at catching up and burning all the records while they're catching up. They're really, really good at that. One day I will probably study in detail what it is that is actually happened, and the type of the details of the internal organization of Chinese project, if there is any source, because I would be very curious how they pull off to do this kind of very large project in a very short amount of time. True, they have the advantage of being the second movers, but even that. Anyway, as I was saying, these carriers, as I was mentioning before, in China are deployed according to the Western doctrine as elements of a battle group, and that's the reason why they are less effective, as we were mentioning before. Okay, about the Fujian, the ship doesn't have cracks, as I was saying at the beginning. It is nearing completion, and probably this year we will see the first sea trials. As you can see from this picture, we can see the 3 electromagnetic catapults that are fully visible now. It's, as you can see, quite a large ship. It is 80,000 tons of displacement. The catapults have been tested with dead weights and, well, seem to work. Apparently, from what we have seen, they are capable of shooting these weights. Also interesting has been a mock-up of a J-35 has been spotted. These are used for testing the movements of the aircraft on the deck and in the hangar. So this is it's not a true aircraft, it's just a model with the same size that can be handled in the same way, and it is just used for this kind of test. But this is a confirmation that the J-35 will be part of the air wing of the 003. Jawad Kazmi, thank you. China's rate of development has been exceptional. Yes, I agree. That is the fastest development in probably human history. That's something the economists will study for centuries. Okay, the J-35, this is, I already made a video on the channel about this aircraft. Obviously, we don't know much. It is a naval version of what started as a sort of a private venture with a prototype that was called the FC-31. Is now undergoing tests. Okay, it is being developed. It has already flown. It has been developed and so on. It's a medium fighter. There are not much data. I'm sure I'm following, and as soon as anything is actually emerging, I will definitely have a closer look. Probably even more important than the J-35 is the Xi'an KJ600, which, as you can see, is something that looks a lot like an AC-2 Hawkeye, and this is going to be the naval early warning aircraft for the Type 03 and above. Yeah, they say one may say that they actually copied the Hawkeye. But, well, it's basically a turboprop, okay? The Chinese already have non-negligible fleet of AWACS that even there are some declaration from the Americans, from the U.S. Navy, that say that they have interesting features, and so they didn't need to copy an AWACS. And they didn't need to copy a light turboprop. It's just a case of form follows function. So it is an enormous program. Okay, a lot of resources are involved in this. And again, the question is it worth it just to attack Taiwan? I mean, Taiwan is just 170 kilometers off the coast of China. I mean, it's not that a carrier has a lot in this context. I mean, the American scenarios, the war games that we took at the beginning, they were mentioning before, normally show the Chinese carrier sort of trying to envelop Taiwan and protect Taiwan somehow. But is it really worth it? I don't know. This is a question that leaves me a bit perplexed. And thinking about this perplexity led me to think about a scenario which is a bit of an apocalypse, something which may potentially, at the end of the day, influence the life of all of us. And I hope to be wrong, but I'm going to share this with you now. So, do you remember this? All these bases that pretty much seal the Chinese coast and the South China Sea. This is clear when this will be completed. It will be there will be a lot of places where the US and Allied forces could operate to contain China. And I believe that Chinese planners don't sleep well thinking to this. And also, do you remember this area, the South China Sea, the area around the Malacca Strait and the Indian approaches, which are the areas that are needed to be that China need to be in control of to keep the jugular artery open. So let's see. So with that in mind, let's make a couple of scenarios. So what happens if China attacks Taiwan with the objective of conquering the island? Well, the US will respond because they will probably jump on the casus belli to try and inflict a lesson to China. At the US, and the first thing that they will do is closing the access to the Malacca Strait and trying to strike the bases and the traffic in the South China Sea. Obviously, because the same way we can see that there is that route is extremely important, they see that as well. So it's not a surprise. This is hardly surprising. So what may happen is that the Chinese attack Taiwan. They will be bogged down and in a difficult campaign with part of the island conquered, and another part of the island basically ended up as sort of an Afghanistan in the Western Pacific. So definitely not a situation that is good for any of the two parts, and they end up being cut off from the import of the commodities that they need to run their economy. Sure, for the United States and the Allies won't be a walk in the park. Those war games I was mentioning before normally show that the losses of the Western side are very, very high, way beyond as we have been used to in the past few decades. But at the moment, the United States have the advantage. They have the strategic advantage of controlling the first island chain, and they have also the operational and tactical and technological advantage of having superior numbers of a technology that is, if not the same, it's even better than the Chinese technology. I mean, probably the United States still has a margin in some areas, but it's a margin that is becoming thinner and thinner every year. So, but still, the United States will probably come out on top of this confrontation. So, I argue, if this is the case, if I can say this, the Americans can say this, and the Chinese, which are definitely not stupid, can say this, the only logical conclusion is that China will never attack Taiwan. Because if they can pull it off, maybe to some degree, the specific operation, the consequences will be devastating. Their capability will be lost, and they will be pushed back to, in terms of development, they will be pushed back probably decades. So, what China is going to do? Well, because at some point conquering Taiwan is still an element. No, so something they will do. Well, the first thing that we need to remember is that the objective for the military preparation is 2049. So, quite in the future. Well, quite in the future. They will use this time just to upgrade all their capabilities. They did great in some areas. They will probably close the gap even more in many other areas, and in some other areas they're probably ahead. In a few specific areas they're probably ahead. And particularly, it seems that they will create a fleet of catobars from here to 2049. They can probably build 5, 6, maybe even more. And crucially, they will be much more experienced than they are now. They will have more than 20 years of operations under the belt. So, again, probably in terms of traditions, the difference with the Royal Navy and the US Navy will still be there, but again, it will become thinner and thinner and thinner. And the other thing that they need to do is to resolve their pending controversies with India, because assuring the Indian neutrality and friendship for them is essential. So the current contrast, mainly territorial contrasts that China has with India will probably be either become frozen or resolved, and there will be probably a tightening of the relations between the two countries, because they are not directly in competition, or at least they're not too much in competition, so they can probably find a common ground. And for those who think that because of the recent participation on the alliance, on the four alliance and the alliance, I mean, for those who think that India is in the Western camp because it is now part of an alliance with the United States and blah, 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 rest assured, the only interest India is safeguarding is its own interest. India is playing on all tables at the same time. Okay? So they may be friendly today and enemies tomorrow. Okay? Depending what they believe is better for them. But this is strategic but for China, having a friendly India is definitely strategic. So the way they could start the operation was to neutralize the US bases nearby with tactical strikes. Okinawa comes to mind, but also the Japanese bases. And for those who say that they will never attack bases on the Japanese soil to avoid provoking the Japanese, well, in the Chinese desert, I should have included the picture actually, in the Chinese desert, There is a target range where there is the Yokosuka military base drone on the desert with the silhouettes of the ships at anchor, just to test the missile precision. So yeah, I think that they will be targeting this kind of bases even in Japan. They will probably attack also the bases in the second island chain. I mean, the island farther from this first island chain is close down in, with long-range strikes. So the bombers, the H-6, can get there, but with the cruise missiles can get there. But there's also plenty of ballistic missiles that can get there. Part of the carrier fleet that have been built will be used in the South China Sea to cooperate with the bases that are already there, to go against the Philippines that recently have signed an agreement with the United States to give them some more bases. I mean, those light blue circle points, light blue dots are becoming real bases within a few years. So they will probably use their force to the aircraft carrier force to neutralize these bases, and they will use another part of the carrier force to neutralize Singapore and the bases in the area, and probably land on the island, land in Singapore, and occupy some ground positions around the Strait of Malacca, and then reinforce it with other forces. And, well, if they manage to do that with a friendly India, then the jugular artery may remain open, even in case of prolonged hostilities. If they control Singapore, they can also operate in the Indian Ocean to protect the commercial traffic from the U.S. Navy elements that manage to get there. Obviously, these are broad strokes. There are a lot of details that we could get into, but how it could happen. But I mean, that will take hours and hours and hours, and I'm not definitely feeling at the best now. So, well, as I said, in this way the jugular vein remains open. And so, if you're American, you're probably thinking this is impossible, because in the time that they will catch up, we will also develop, which is true, definitely. But again, it's not a matter of being equal, it's a matter of closing. And the objective is not being global, but is actually being capable of maintaining this pipeline where the oil mostly is going to flow toward China. This in mind, by 2049, this dependency could also be easier to do that, because the dependency from fossil fuels could be somewhat lower. So, Michael Mayo, sorry to say this, but this presentation seems stupid. Do you think that the CCP is stockpiling 5 years of soybeans for no reason? After a few million Chinese and US die, are you going to call it a strategic error? Well, no, there's not a strategic error, it's correct. Posmo saying, why not China just blockade Taiwan? Because if they just blockade Taiwan, they will be, once the United States and the other coalition actor have collected their forces, they will be now, or in the next 10 years, they will be swept away. They are not as strong enough. So, I was saying, this seems impossible, okay? because it was basically saying, China, if China can't even get Taiwan, it needs to actually neutralize all these positions. Well, I believe that China will wait, eventually even beyond 2049, until they have this capability. I don't think that China will attack before they're ready. And it's not just my assessment. There are indeed some Chinese publications where the Chinese theorists say we will not get into a fight with US Navy until we get to a substantial strategic parity. So I don't think that they want to get into a fight now, even though they want Taiwan back. They don't want to get into a fight now, in the near future. Okay, now parking the fact that it seems impossible. So if they manage to complete these objectives, Taiwan is not in a position to defend itself. It will fall. Just becomes a matter of time before it falls. A successful offensive on this scale has also the potential to significantly reduce the American potential, because the losses of the United States will be high, and there will be losses of high technology assets, all these kind of high technology assets that are planning to deploy in the Pacific, which is important. You may expect also that non-conventional operation will happen on the continental United States. I'm practically sure this is going to happen, considering the Chinese doctrine. So if we get to this stage, it's either a ceasefire with a new world equilibrium or a nuclear exchange. And I hope I am wrong. You may argue, well, that's good, we have plenty of time to defuse the problem. Well, I think we are in the typical devil's alternative here, because the more the United States waits, the more it becomes difficult to defeat China. Today, the United States enjoy a strategic and military advantage, and that is going to be progressively eroded. That's just a fact. They're catching up. It's a developing country. They're catching up. They have all the potential to catch up. So for the United States, it's better to act now than wait. Because if they wait, deterrence will probably stop working. It's probably working now, surely working now, as I said. They won't act until they are reasonably sure to pull it off, to be successful and being capable of doing this operation. But the more they wait, the more the possibilities become smaller. The US pushes... So what they could do, for example, is to push Taiwan to declare itself an independent state. And if it happens, I think that China cannot lose face and will quickly mount an operation. And the invasion turns out to be very difficult, and the US-led coalition wins, paying a hefty price, but wins. And then we have a nuclear exchange. So basically, if China wins, there's a good probability that we will get a nuclear exchange. If China loses, there's a good probability that we are going to have a nuclear exchange. And this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, there are 392 of you, which is fantastic. I'm taking some question. I actually answered during the stream the question of those who actually use the super chat. And thank you very much to Michael Mayo. Where probably we don't agree definitely on several things, but yeah. Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, I'm taking some questions. I'm starting looking at the chat details now. So, house construction in China stopped in 2020 due to the lack of building nails from China's lockdown. Yes, there is a strange thing going on in China. Normally, when the building industry, the construction industry is not very active, it's a strong precursor, a strong predictor of a recession, which is not happening. I mean, the construction has been weak for quite a long time, but in China it's not happening. This is in my eyes, is proof that the conventional laws of economy don't apply to China. It's a long story, but they are capitalist communists, which is a very strange thing. Should be interest of the USA that South America creates a united country and aligned to them, because in the South, if the South joins China, US loses almost all its advantages. Yes, that's a possibility. I mean, China is, with some hiccups, for example, like the dam in Ecuador, but is showing a growing penetration in South America. And the reason is always the same. While staying on the American side, going with the the military, with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and say, I mean, all the basically US-led, US-aligned institutions comes with a lot of strings attached. The Chinese have way, way fewer strings. United States aims at exporting a model, a state model, let's say, a way of life and so on. China doesn't care at all. China minds business. The man in the low closet who is a friend disagrees on several points. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he disagrees on several points. We had a lot of discussions about that. I missed it. What were the cracks in the carrier peaks? Leaks, fluids that run through the decks. We don't know exactly what fluids, but they were fluids. So they basically mopped the deck and they went away. That's just bait to get you to click. Yes, it was a discreetly baity title. Russia would use tactical nukes, but Ukrainians don't cluster their forces. No, it's not true. The Russians won't use tactical nukes until the Russian existence is menaced. They may have slightly lower bar, but we're nowhere near that point. Michael and Raymonier, why not see China as a friend rather than an enemy? Yes, 100%. 100%. A reasonable ruling class would try to find a common ground and try to peacefully settle whatever the problems may be. We don't seem to have that kind of ruling class. Okay, there's some slightly derogatory things, which I don't commend at all. Please be polite. There are a lot of comments. The man in the low closet, yeah. Sorry, we have been there already, so I'm not repeating. Thank you for participating. I think it's important, are interesting points for the other people in the chat. Okay, I'm not replying directly if you don't mind. Sorry. Eric J, at least most of Europe won't fight in the Pacific. Well, if it is short, no. If it gets long, everyone may be asked a brigade or two, or a squadron or two. Jawad Kazmi, NATO, US seriously underestimated Russia too. Well, maybe not seriously, but up to a point, yes. Up to a point, yes. It's more a cultural problem, honestly, than more than a military or doctrinal problem. We should make a video on semiconductors and space. That's an interesting idea. That's your specialty, so maybe sometimes. Chris Neira, great video, thank you. Okay, this would have been a video if I could have worked regularly. Could have been a long video if I could have worked regularly. But I mean, building in this case a live stream like this is, let's say, less. Requires less work. So I just basically need to do the presentation. Making a video requires much more work, and I'm currently I haven't fully recovered yet. I sort of feel quite weak, to be honest. Okay, I see there is quite a lot of I've seen quite a lot of comments and discussion among the chat, which is a great thing. There are 383 people, which is I don't know if it's a record. Probably the live stream with the B-21 was for the B-21 rollout had more, but yeah. Chris Neira, what do you think China and US has learned from the Ukrainian conflict? Well, I think that they're looking quite closely at the tactics and at the use of electronics in the conflict. I think this is something that they're looking, and it is already changing. You can see some signs of the situation already changing, actually. Another one, do you think the Chinese J-10 aircraft would participate in an offensive action on the water, or would its character in a conflict be more defensive? It has legs good enough to get to Taiwan, definitely. If it could be based, for example, in one of these atolls in the South China Sea, could be an effect. Could still be could be an effective weapon. Obviously, I think that the big question about the Chinese Air Force is: A, are they going to start building more tankers? And B, is there going to be a land version of the J-35? Michael Andrei Molnar, can you do videos on Cold War Soviet aircraft? It's not a subject. There are some other specialists like Chris on Military Aviation History channel that do these things very well. I sometimes do some historical stuff, but that's not the core of the channel. Okay. One, why can? I'm pretty sure J-35 variants are already confirmed. The J-35 is fairly larger than the F-35, which points toward a non-C variant as well. Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm waiting to see something more firm. Puffalupugos. The problem with the view in China is a friend nation is that the viewpoint has to be mutually shared, and China has made it painfully obvious that is not happening on their side ever. The Brits and the French killed each other for centuries, and now they are the best friends. It's not true. Things change. Man of Sun, we see another video live stream regarding Israel versus Iran. What are your assessment there? Oh, that's an interesting thing. I'm still making up my mind. I think that what we can say is that we can say two things, basically. The first is that the Israeli defenses, with some help, actually work very well. Probably even a bit better than expected, to be honest. And the other is that the Iranian probably used 2-3% of their stores of drones, missiles, and weapons. So in a prolonged conflict, probably the Iranian side will get to a point where there will be no weapons available, no high-tech weapons available to defend Israel. But then is such a long-range attack enough to sort of destroy the capability of Israel to defend itself? I don't have an answer, at least not yet. VFX Gangsta. US viewed Japan as a threat during the 80s when its economy was projected to surpass the US. Yeah, true. That's true. Japan went through that stage at some point. Michael Fitzgerald, how is Free Trade Act not promoting it? You are just spreading hate and lies. Please tell me who I'm hating, since I am actually vying for peace and dialogue in all this conversation, and what are the lies? Feel free to let me know, maybe in the comments after the live stream. The Filipinos aren't dumb. They don't want the problem of a U.S. military base there. They remember the problem with Shuby Bay and Clark. They actually already just did. They just did it. They signed an agreement for 6 medium small bases in the Philippines, with the United States, obviously. Any plans of making a any plans of making a video explaining how to build your own fighter jet that talks about aircraft design and all that from the ground up? Wow! So it took me 5 years at university. That's a big thing. It also requires a lot of mathematics that I don't know how well received it is. You know that I don't shy away from the occasional formula to explain things, but that would be very different. It would be fun, probably, but it would be very different. Tullius Tech, again, for India and China to be friends or for India to be neutral, how do you see the situation of Arunachal Pradesh working out? Does not look like China wants to give up claims. They will find a compromise. When there's a will, there's a way, okay? Things that seem extremely important now, and maybe even in life, when something way more important comes around, take the back burner, and problems that seem unsolvable are actually solved. I don't have a specific idea of what they could do, because I don't know enough details. I'm pretty sure that they will find a way to get along. The fact that they are founding members of the BRICS is a good starting point. Okay. Okay, I think it's quite late and I've been speaking for about 2 hours. So honestly, I start feeling a bit tired. So probably can end the live stream now. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for following me. It's sort of almost, I moved to seeing so many people following. As I said, an old man yelling at the cloud. You have all my gratitude. I think it's a honor that you gave me your time. Please support the channel if you can. Again, thank you very, very, very much for watching, and see you next time.